Thank you very much, Dr. Bedu, for keeping to time. The next speaker is Mr. Van AMUZU, the principles and practice of cardiopulmonary bypass.
We thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to give this talk. We'll go with a little history, and this gentleman, William Harvey, published his De Motu Cordis on the motion of the heart and blood, describing the functions of the heart and the circulation of blood around the body. And again, the myth of the untouchableness of the heart was broken when Ludwig Rand and Dwight Haken managed to operate on the heart, saving people with sharp nails in their hearts. And then came Wilfred Gordon Bigelow. He worked on hypothermia, experimenting on animals to reduce oxygen consumption, in other words, the basic metabolic rate, by 50% and dropping the temperature by 7 degrees. And he published his work in 1952. It is also worth mentioning that he also pioneered the first pacemaker. But unfortunately, he was beaten to the first open heart case by John Lewis. And he and his team took the opportunity to operate on a 5-year-old Jacqueline Johnson diagnosed with ASD. And the patient was surface cooled to 28 degrees, and the heart rate dropped to 50%. They reckoned that they had 6 minutes within which to work, and this was from the previous works. And the vessels were clamped, and the atrium opened, and the whole suture. The patient left the hospital 11 days later. Now, with the cardiopulmonary infrastructure, we have the heart pumping about 5 liters per minute over vasculature of 75,000 miles or 120,000 kilometers over a lung surface area of about 1,200 meters square. And the question was, how can we substitute the heart and the lungs? And so it got our friend Dr. John Gibbon to work, and he spent a substantial part of his life experimenting on this. And we are told he got this impetus from monitoring a patient that was diagnosed with a pulmonary embolism. And the following day, he was operated upon, and the patient died in 1930. But the concept itself of pumping blood or oxygenating tissues was not new. It started in the 1800s, beginning with the work of Cesar Julian Jean Legalois in 1813, some say 1812. He reasoned or suggested that if there could be a way of external perfusion of an isolated organ or tissue of the body, one could preserve such an organ or tissue for a long period of time. But it wasn't until the middle of the century that Charles Edward Brown Sequard pointed out that the success of such perfusion depended on oxygenated blood. Some others were working on this principle, but the early perfusion devices that were used had limited capability to exchange gases. And these were limited to animal experiments. But there was no link to heart surgery in humans. In 1929, Brukhonenko, far away in Russia, speculated that artificial circulation of blood might someday be applicable for cardiac surgery in humans. We can say that he conceived the ultimate value of cardiopulmonary bypass and its potential use in humans. After 3 decades of experimenting on animals, John Gibbon finally developed the first heart-lung machine with help from IBM corporations. The method of oxygenation was the screen film type of oxygenation. John Gibbon's first attempt using the heart-lung machine failed, not because the machine failed, but it was found out after or during a post-mortem that the patient was misdiagnosed. He had a large PDA, there was no ASD. And the next patient survived an ASD closure, but the next 2 patients died. And then Dr. Gibbon declared a moratorium on heart-lung machines, and he never operated on the heart again. Meanwhile, John Kirkling and his team at the Mayo Clinic modified the IBM Gibbon screen film oxygenator and used it in a large series of patients in the mid to late 50s. Walton Lillehei, or Lillehei, depending on where you're coming from, and his team used cross-circulation to close a VSD. However, the patient died post-op with respiratory problems, but the technique was continued and used successfully to repair VSDs, fallows, and AVSDs. 45 patients in 2 years, and the technique was abandoned in 55. So the first heart-lung support was the Gibbon's pump or another human circulation. Now, the first oxygenators were bubble oxygenators. And we have a structure here of how the first oxygenation looks like. You have the blood coming from the venous circulation put through a column of oxygenation cylinder and a transverse debubbling chamber through another spiral debubbling reservoir, and the pump pumps it through the arterial circulation. So here we have the bubble oxygenators, and then it was improved to disposable ones, and then they moved on to membrane oxygenators. The blood pumps that were used were roller pumps, and then later on, centrifugal pumps were introduced. And this is the structure of the cardiopulmonary bypass setup that many people come behind the heart-lung machine and they are confused. And so we have the blood shunted from the vena cava into a venous reservoir. And then this is pumped by the systemic blood pump into the oxygenator. The oxygenator these days is mainly membrane oxygenators. And then we get oxygenation from the gas blender. Some of the machines have an anesthetic vaporizer on it. And then the blood is oxygenated in the oxygenator and flows through the tubings to the aortic cannula. Meanwhile, the 3 other pumps, normally we have 4 pumps on the machines, 3 others are used for suction from the aortic root, sucking out the cardioplegia, and the cardiotomy suction from the field, and then the left ventricular vent. And all this go back through a filter, which is normally not seen because it's now incorporated in the venous reservoir. During the cardiopulmonary bypass, these parameters are monitored. And in doing this, it's the perfusionist who is an alert, attentive, well-trained personnel is required to assemble, operate, and to operate the heart-lung machine. Gas monitoring, venous saturation, cerebral saturation, heparin titration, all these are being used. We have moved from the older forms of blood extracorporeal circulation circuits and pumps to the modern oxygenators and heart-lung machines. So we've moved from those antiques. Now these are what we are using today. For the future, they are talking about robotics. I heard Professor Frimpong talking about people moving ahead to robotics. And this is the stage they want to reach. And it is an affront to the perfusionist, because they want to kick us out of job. The first cardiac surgery employing cardiopulmonary bypass was performed in Ghana in 1992, almost 40 years after Dr. Gibbon's operation. The National Cardiothoracic Center, Ghana, was dreamt, pursued, and accomplished by Professor Frimpong Boateng with financing from the government at the time. I was part of the initial core group that was selected to go to Germany to be trained to prepare for the setting up of the center. Initially, we used consumables from the project contractors, which were brought from Germany. We designed our own custom pack in 1994, and I was privileged to be the one to do that with Dideco then, and it is now Dideco Sorin. We started with bubble oxygenators, and by 1997, 98 thereabout, we introduced membrane oxygenators, and then by 2000, we phased out the bubble oxygenators. We used the Stockart heart-lung machine as the CAPS system, which is the computer-assisted program model, and then we changed to the S3. We have 3 sets of cardiopulmonary bypass packs: pediatrics, infant pediatrics, and then the adults. And this, we are able to do all the spectrum of cardiopulmonary bypass at the center. The center, the cardiopulmonary bypass has come to stay. It's a routine in our center. It has come to stay, and we need, I believe, a regional cooperation or sub-regional cooperation to keep it going. Thank you.